Have you ever asked yourself why some women don't have a boyfriend? Why they're not out searching? Why they seem completely at peace, even when they're alone? It's not because they've given up, and it's not because they're broken. The truth lies somewhere quieter, deeper, and far more powerful. When a woman chooses solitude, she's not running away. She's returning to herself. It's not loneliness. She's embracing. It's a kind of declaration without words, a quiet vow to no longer live by someone else's timeline. She doesn't chase comfort to fill a void. She doesn't rush into arms just to silence the night. What she seeks isn't love in the usual sense. What she seeks is clarity, presence, truth. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that is rejected from the self appears in the shadow." Maybe that's exactly who these women have become, living embodiments of the shadow society avoids. Because when a woman doesn't need saving, when she doesn't depend on anyone to feel complete, she breaks the entire system of emotional control that was built on dependence and approval. She isn't cold. She's just tired of burning for people who never wanted to feel her warmth. And the silence she carries with her, it's not emptiness. It's strength that others don't yet know how to respond to. Where does that strength come from? From collapse, from crying alone where no one could see, from giving too much. Until she learned to hold something back, people will label her, call her picky, guarded, detached. But what they don't understand is that she simply learned to be selective, not out of pride, but because she finally knows the value of her own presence. She doesn't want someone just to walk beside her out of fear of being alone. She wants someone who's worthy of the path she's had to walk to get here. And if you're still watching this, maybe there's a part of you that's wondered too. Am I missing something by being alone? Is there something wrong with me? Let me be clear. You're not lacking. You're transforming. And in that transformation, silence is not a punishment. It's a return home. If these words stirred something in you, let this video be your reminder. Not to rush, not to explain, but to listen to the part of you that already knows. Allow yourself the space to pause, to recalibrate. And if this message resonates, like this video, leave a comment, or share it with a woman you know who's in the middle of her awakening. Because in a world that constantly tells you to go find someone, maybe the most radical thing you can do is finally stay with yourself. There's something quietly terrifying about a woman who no longer looks for rescue. Because once she stops waiting to be saved, she becomes something the world doesn't know how to categorize. Not submissive, not rebellious, just so verein. She used to crave warmth in other people's eyes, validation, soft promises, the illusion that love would be the antidote to emptiness. She was taught that softness was her superpower, that her value lived in how much she could give, how much she could endure, how little she needed in return. And so she gave, even when it drained her, even when it cost her pieces of herself she didn't know how to name until they were gone. Carl Jung once wrote, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." And she knows that hell, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet hell of being unseen while smiling, of loving men who never looked past her body, of apologizing for needing depth in a shallow world. She begged for crumbs and called it connection. She mistook silence for peace and chaos for passion. She burned herself trying to keep others warm, until all that was left was smoke and a heart too tired to beat for anyone but herself. But something broke, and, ironically, it was that break that saved her. She didn't shatter because she was weak. She shattered because she'd been too strong. For too long. In the wrong direction. And when she fell, she didn't fall apart. She fell inward. That's the part people miss. They think she's cold now, that she's closed off. But the truth is far more dangerous. She's awake. Awake to her patterns. Awake to her projections. Awake to the invisible contracts she once signed with silence. She no longer gives herself away like a discount. She doesn't mistake availability for love, or affection for commitment. Her love is no longer unconditional. It has boundaries now. Sharp ones. Not because she's bitter, but because she's done bleeding for people who call it love, but never stay to clean the wound. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. When a woman heals, she doesn't just change. She disrupts. She becomes a mirror. And most people can't handle their own reflection. So they call her difficult, hard to please, too much. But she isn't too much. They were simply never enough for themselves. She no longer wants a savior. She wants a mirror, someone who's faced their own darkness, someone who's wrestled with their shadow and didn't run. Because that's what she's done, night after night, alone with the memories, the scars, the questions no one else wanted to ask. She became her own witness, her own sanctuary, and that changed everything. Sonu, she doesn't smile for approval anymore. She doesn't flirt to feel seen. She doesn't stay silent to keep the peace. Because peace that demands silence isn't peace. It's prison. And she's already served that sentence. Now, she speaks. Not loudly, but clearly. She chooses. Not desperately, but consciously. And in doing so, she reminds the world of something it has tried so hard to forget. That a woman who owns herself, who no longer seeks permission to exist, is not a threat to men. She's a threat to the system that keeps men and women from becoming whole. So if you've made it this far into the story, thank you. Seriously, thank you for being the kind of person who doesn't just scroll, who stays to listen, who reflects. It's support like yours that allows messages like this to exist, to reach more people, to start conversations that matter. If you feel this video gave you something, a moment of clarity, a shift in perspective, or even just a breath of truth, consider supporting this work through a super thanks below. It's not just about funding content. It's about fueling a space where deeper stories, where real stories can be told. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more truth. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we're building together. Carl Jung believed that whatever we deny within ourselves, whatever we exile to the quiet corners of our unconscious, does not vanish. It waits. It watches. It gathers weight in silence. And one day, it walks beside us as the shadow. We don't meet the shadow in books or in dreams dressed in beauty. We meet it when the masks we wear begin to crack, when love doesn't feel like safety, and when our reflection no longer matches the story we tell ourselves. She met hers, not once, but many times. The woman who now lives alone, who no longer apologizes for needing space, who doesn't explain her choices like confessions. She is the product of a long and brutal meeting with her own shadow. Not the curated darkness that poets glamorize, but the raw, shaking truth. The moment she realized that being needed isn't the same as being loved, that being praised isn't the same as being seen, that being wanted can be the most dangerous trap of all when it comes from those who only want to possess, not honor. She stopped calling it fate. She began to trace patterns, the same emotional wounds wearing new faces, the same cycles of giving too much and receiving too little. And in those patterns, she saw the shadow, not just her own, but the collective one, the one that tells women that silence is noble, that self-sacrifice is divine, that suffering in love is the price of being feminine. But Carl Jung said, The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that's what she did. Piece by piece. She stopped apologizing for the parts of her that were called too intense, too quiet, too complex, too ambitious. She began to gather herself from all the places she had been fragmented. From every room she left pieces of her voice. From every lover she allowed to define her worth. From every script society handed her, with smiles that meant, be smaller, be softer, be easier to love. But she no longer wants to be loved for being easy. She wants to be loved for being true. So now, when you look at her and say, she's different, you're right. She doesn't perform femininity for comfort anymore. She doesn't chase closure from people who never gave her honesty. She doesn't flirt to be chosen. She chooses. Because her solitude has become sacred. Not the kind of sacred that isolates, but the kind that filters, that clarifies. She can sense your fear of depth before you open your mouth. She can feel the performance in your touch. And she doesn't hesitate to walk away when energy feels borrowed. When presence feels like a mask, what you see as her distance is actually discipline. What feels like silence is self-respect. What feels unreachable is simply a woman who will no longer abandon herself to be understood. And that is terrifying. Because in a world where people search for others to complete them, to save them, to fill the space, they refuse to enter alone. She has already been there. She has walked that desert, drunk from the well of her own emptiness, faced the ghost of every love that cost her too much. And when she emerged, she carried nothing but truth. She is no longer afraid of being alone. She is afraid of betraying herself again in the name of belonging. So if you stand before her today, don't bring your ego. Bring your courage. Don't bring promises. Bring presence. Don't bring harm. Bring clarity. Because the threshold to her love is not seduction. It is self-awareness. And if that seems like too much, then she's not your destination. She is your mirror. Because when a woman has integrated her shadow, when she no longer divides herself to be palatable, her entire existence becomes a quiet revolution. She no longer asks for space. She is the space. And only those who are whole will know what to do with her silence. People think she's closed off, that she's built walls too high, that no one can reach her. But they misunderstand. Her solitude isn't a wall, it's a threshold. A line not drawn to keep others out, but to protect the sacred space she bled to create. Because on the other side of that threshold, she no longer negotiates with ghosts. She no longer explains herself to those who only want her light, but flinch at her shadow. She doesn't demand perfection, but she does demand presence. The kind of presence that doesn't disappear when things get uncomfortable. The kind of presence that can sit in silence, not needing to perform, not needing to fix. She doesn't care how attractive you are. She wants to know where you go when you're hurt. What you do when someone tells you no. Whether your strength is a mask or a depth. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. But she didn't avoid it. She entered it, and now, that's her standard. She can no longer pretend she doesn't see your avoidance. She can no longer unhear the silence when you dodge your own truth. What once thrilled her now repels her. What once made her feel wanted now feels invasive. What once seemed romantic now reeks of performance. She watches how you speak about women, how you speak about your mother, how you treat the parts of yourself that still feel broken, because how you hold your own wounds tells her everything about how you'll hold hers. She no longer wants someone to fill the silence. She wants someone who can hold it. She no longer wants adrenaline. She wants attunement. Someone who doesn't mistake emotional chaos for chemistry. You think you're approaching a woman, But you're standing before a temple, not built of ego, but of ashes. Ashes from all the identities she had to burn just to come back to herself. The girl who begged is gone. The woman who begged to be seen, to be picked, to be loved just enough to feel worthy. She buried her, and in her place stood up something ancient, something still, something primal, something whole. You don't win a woman like her. You match her, not in intensity, but in awareness. Because now, her attention is not a gift you earn with charm. It's an alignment, a natural gravity between souls who have both gone to war with themselves and survived. And so when she walks away, know this: she's not punishing you. She's protecting herself. She's choosing truth over noise, depth over display, and she no longer offers herself in fragments. It's all or nothing. And not everyone is ready for that kind of woman. In a world that hands out validation like candy, she lives on discernment. In a world that fears silence, she has made it her sanctuary. In a world where most people chase love to feel complete, she has become complete first, and waits only for what complements that. So if you approach her with half words, with half truths, with half-formed intentions, you will not make it past her threshold, because she's not looking for someone to enter. She's watching who has done the work to arrive. She's no longer moved by pressure. She's moved by presence, no longer impressed by effort. She's drawn to essence, and that kind of woman. She doesn't repel love. She refines it, elevates it, filters out the noise until only the real remains. There comes a moment in a woman's life when love stops being the goal, not because she gave up on it, but because she outgrew what the world told her it was. She no longer wants to be swept off her feet. She wants her feet firmly on the ground, and a partner who knows how to meet her there, not from above, not from below, but eye to eye, soul to soul. The old stories, they told her to wait, to soften, to be agreeable, to lower her standards so she could finally be chosen. But she has chosen herself, and that changes everything. She no longer needs love to fill a void, because she no longer carries one. She is not looking for completion. She is looking for coherence. Not a man to fix her, but one who's fixed himself. Not a savior, but an equal. A man who doesn't fear her independence, because he's not intimidated by silence. He's done his work. He knows how to sit in solitude without mistaking it for rejection. He doesn't need her to shrink. He doesn't flinch when she says no. He understands that love doesn't mean dissolving into each other. It means standing beside each other as two whole beings who've both made peace with their shadows. Carl Jung taught that true relationship is not found by merging. It is found in the conscious encounter between two individuated souls. And she is now fully individuated. She has spent years peeling off the layers of cultural conditioning, romantic illusions, and inherited wounds. So now, she doesn't just want a man. She wants a container for truth, for expansion, for freedom that doesn't require abandonment, because she's already tasted the other kind. The kind of love that came with conditions, with silence, with a subtle erosion of self in the name of intimacy. And she won't return to that. Now, love must meet her where she is, grounded, awake, uncompromising in what she knows to be real. She will no longer beg to be understood. If you get her, you get her. If you don't, she blesses your path and moves on. She's not playing games. She's guarding sacred ground. And that's why she now seems too much. Because most people aren't used to a woman who doesn't need to be needed. They mistake her discernment for pride, her standards for arrogance, her solitude for superiority. But she's not trying to be above anyone. She's just no longer willing to shrink to be loved. She longs for connection, but only the kind that allows her to keep her soul intact. Only the kind where silence isn't awkward, truth isn't feared, and absence isn't punishment. She doesn't want to be everything to someone. She wants to be her full self next to someone who's doing the same. That's not romance. That's revolution. And in a world that still praises women for being easy to love, she has become something else entirely. Hard to impress, impossible to possess, unwilling to trade freedom for company. So if she loves you, understand the weight of that gift. She has walked away from comfort to become this clear. She has died 100 quiet deaths to finally love from a place that doesn't seek to conquer or collapse. This love, if she offers it, is not a transaction. It is a mirror. It will reflect back every part of you. The light, the shadow, the undone work, and the unspoken truth. Because love, to her now, is not about merging. It's about mirroring transformation. And that kind of love, it doesn't show up on timelines. It arrives like an initiation, like a storm that leaves only the real standing. So when you meet her, the woman who's no longer begging to be seen, no longer compromising for closeness, know this: you're not meeting someone who wants love. You're meeting someone who has redefined it. Someone who will never again choose comfort at the cost of her consciousness. Someone who no longer confuses attachment with devotion. And someone who knows deep in her bones that loving someone should never require the death of your own truth. Thank you for staying with this story. It means you're not just a viewer. You're part of a deeper conversation. And if this message resonates with you, if you feel it reflects something true within your own life or someone you know, consider supporting this space with a super thanks. Not for the sake of transaction, but to keep this kind of truth breathing in a world that desperately needs it. Your presence here matters, and your resonance is what makes this more than a video. It makes it a movement. Even after awakening, after the self-remembering, after the shadow has been faced, there is something that doesn't go away. Loneliness. Not the kind that begs for attention, not the kind that fears empty rooms, but the kind that whispers at night, softly, truthfully, you are no longer like them. Because once you see, you can't unsee. Once you've touched the depth of your own soul, the surface world begins to feel foreign. The small talk, the social dances, the masked smiles, they exhaust her. She doesn't belong to that rhythm anymore. She moves slower now. She listens with her body. She speaks only when something real demands to be said. And that creates a quiet distance. One she never asked for, but one she honors, because closeness no longer means safety. Now, closeness must mean truth. And truth is rare. She can sit in a room full of people and feel more alone than when she's walking under the stars with no one by her side. She can be in conversation and still hunger for silence, because there are only so many people who can meet her where she truly is. Carl Jung said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." And that's exactly where she lives now, in the space between understanding and the inability to translate herself into small words for small minds. This is the cost of awareness. This is the tax of individuation. She doesn't regret it. She wouldn't undo it. But some nights, it aches. Not like heartbreak, but like standing on a mountaintop alone. The view is breathtaking. The air is pure, but no one is there to share it with. And she stopped trying to drag others up the mountain. She knows now each soul climbs when it's ready. Each person awakens in their own time. So she stays still. She keeps her fire burning. And in that quiet, in that aloneness, she finds something more valuable than company. Integrity. She has no audience to perform for, no one to impress, just herself, her breath, her choices. And while that may not look romantic, or exciting, or even happy, it is real. She doesn't numb her loneliness anymore. She walks through it, lets it wash over her, listens to what it's trying to say. Sometimes it says, "You are not meant to be understood by many." Other times, "You've outgrown places you once called home." And on rare nights, it simply says, "Keep going." So she does. She keeps going, even when her bed is empty, even when her phone is quiet, even when the world moves too fast, and her soul demands slowness. She no longer mistakes the void for a sign that something's wrong. She knows now the void is part of the rebirth. A clearing, a pause, a test of whether she will abandon herself just to not feel alone again. But she won't. Not this time. Because she remembers how it felt to be surrounded by people and still feel invisible. She remembers how it drained her to give and give, while shrinking inch by inch just to be kept. Now she chooses emptiness over erosion. Now she chooses silence over noise. And in that choice, even in the ache, even in the chill of night, she finds something rare, something holy, peace. Not the peace that comes from being held, but the peace that comes from no longer reaching for hands that can't hold her. She has become her own ground, her own light, her own shelter. And though it may not always be easy, it is always sacred, because when a woman learns to stand alone with dignity, when she befriends her solitude instead of fearing it, she becomes unshakable, not untouchable, not invincibly, but rooted. Rooted in something the world can't seduce. Rooted in a self that doesn't collapse just because it isn't mirrored. And that is the foundation of a new kind of strength. One that doesn't shout. One that doesn't sparkle. One that doesn't need to be validated. It just is. Like a mountain. Like the moon. Like silence that no longer needs to be filled. There is a moment quiet, unannounced, when everything shifts. She stops waiting, not because she's bitter, not because she's tired, but because she no longer believes that love is something outside of her, waiting to arrive and rescue her from herself. No, she has walked through her shadows. She has sat in silence so deep. It stripped her of every illusion. And what remained was not a woman empty and waiting, but a woman so full. She overflowed. This is the paradox of healing. You begin by trying to fix what was broken. But if you go deep enough, you realize nothing essential was ever broken. Just forgotten, buried, twisted into shapes to please people who never even knew your name. But now she remembers, not with her mind, but with her being, her breath, her presence. She no longer wants love. She is love. She radiates it. But not the kind that bends over backward. Not the kind that waits at the door. Not the kind that begs to be held. This love doesn't chase. It calls. It doesn't seduce. It awakens. It doesn't ask, "Will you choose me?" It says, "I have chosen myself, and that is enough." Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And she's claimed that privilege. She no longer performs, no longer wears masks, no longer shapeshifts to fit into anyone's life, because to betray herself for a seat at someone else's table is no longer a price she's willing to pay. She eats alone now. If it means peace, she walks alone. If it means presence, and when love comes, if it comes, it must sit beside her, not above her, not behind her, but beside her as an equal. She doesn't seek spark anymore. She seeks substance, not tension, but tenderness, not chemistry, but compatibility of soul. She no longer believes in love that hurts, love that heals, that sharpens, that deepens. Yes, but not the kind that asks her to make herself small to feel worthy. Because now she knows what you settle for is what you believe you deserve. And she has recalibrated her belief. Her standards are no longer a shield. They are a mirror of how far she's come. You want access to her. Bring integrity. Bring self-awareness. Bring truth, even if it trembles. She doesn't want you perfect. She wants you present, aware of your wounds, responsible for your impact, because she's done cleaning up the messes of those who refuse to look at themselves. She's not here to mother you, not here to fix you, not here to dim her light so yours feels brighter. She wants a man who has stood in the fire of his own becoming and made peace with the smoke, who doesn't see her as a project, but as a parallel force. Two flames, two sovereign paths walking side by side, not entangled, but entuned. And if that doesn't arrive, she won't wait. Not out of hopelessness, but because her life is already full. She has friends that see her, work that matters, a rhythm that doesn't depend on someone else's heartbeat. Her mornings are sacred, her nights are soft. Her laughter is real even when it echoes off the walls alone. She doesn't resist love. She just no longer worships it. It is no longer the center of her life. It is the overflow. If it comes, it must match the life she's already built, not be the reason she abandons it. This is what makes her dangerous. Not because she rejects love, but because she has made peace with its absence. Because only those who have known the silence can truly choose the song. Only those who are no longer starving can recognize real nourishment. And now, that's what she brings. Not need, not demand, but presence. Love, to her, is no longer something she seeks. It is something she is. And in that presence, she no longer waits for the world to find her. She simply walks, and everywhere she goes, she leaves a subtle trail behind, a reminder that love is not something you beg for, it's something you become. The woman who lives alone without a man, without noise, without the need to explain herself, is not someone who failed to find love. She is someone who refused to lose herself in the name of it. Society still looks at her with suspicion. They call her too much. They wonder what's wrong. They whisper, she must be cold. She must be broken. She must be hiding something. And in a way, they're right. She is hiding something, but not from them. For herself, she is hiding the sanctuary she built from years of surviving the fire. Because that kind of peace, the peace that doesn't rely on another person's presence to exist, it's not meant to be paraded. It's meant to be protected. Carl Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside? Dreams. Who looks inside? Awakens. She has looked inside. She has awakened. And now she lives differently. She walks slower, speaks less, feels deeper. She no longer seeks crowds. She seeks clarity, no longer addicted to being chosen. She chooses herself every single day. And that choice is not a rejection of love. It's the highest form of it. Because what she's saying without shouting, without posting, without needing validation, is this: I am enough. Here, now, as I am. Not because someone told her, not because a partner finally proved it, but because she met herself at the lowest point and chose not to abandon her again. She learned that being alone is not a punishment. It's a privilege when it comes from self-respect. She no longer performs. She no longer conforms. She no longer attaches her identity to the opinions of people who never took the time to know her soul. And that is dangerous. Because a woman like that can't be sold anything. Not approval. Not fairy tales. Not fear. She no longer fears being misunderstood. because she knows the ones who do understand won't need her to shrink just to make them comfortable. She is no longer a mirror for insecurity. She is a reflection of what's possible when a woman stops waiting. She doesn't walk ahead of anyone, but she no longer follows either. She moves in rhythm with herself. Unapologetic. Unfolding. Unfinished but always aligned. Her presence changes rooms. Not because she demands attention, but because she doesn't. She doesn't wear power like armor. She wears it like truth. And that truth, it's not loud. It's not dressed up. It's not performative. It lives in her breath, in the way she chooses where to go, what to say, when to stay, and when to walk away. So no, she's not just a woman living alone. She's a symbol of emotional sovereignty, of the feminine unchained, of what happens when a woman stops surviving and starts existing on her own terms. Her solitude is not absence, it's wholeness. Her silence is not emptiness, it's alignment. Her lack of a relationship is not a wound, it's a vow to never again abandon herself for the illusion of belonging. And as she continues to walk this path, sometimes alone, often unseen, she leaves behind quiet sparks. For other women, other souls, others who are waking up and realizing that maybe, just maybe, everything they've been taught about love was missing one crucial piece. The self. Because until you belong to yourself, you'll never fully belong to anyone. And now, she belongs to herself. Wholly, undeniably, irreversibly. She is not looking for someone to complete her. She is already complete. And from that completeness, if love comes, it won't be salvation. It will be celebration. So maybe this isn't just about a woman who lives alone. Maybe it's about all of us. All of us who've been told that our worth depends on who chooses us. All of us who've kept ourselves small just to be accepted. All of us who've waited at the door of love hoping to be let in without realizing we were already home. The truth, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you have with your own soul. And it's also the one most people never dare to build, because it's not easy. It's not comfortable. It requires silence, stillness, radical honesty, the kind that doesn't flatter, the kind that burns, the kind that asks, if no one ever loves you the way you want to be loved, will you still stay true to yourself? That is the question. Not whether you'll find someone, not whether you'll be enough for them, but whether you'll stop abandoning yourself every time the room gets quiet, every time love feels far, every time life gets lonely. Because the loneliness that comes from being with the wrong people is far louder than the solitude that comes from walking with your truth. So if you're still here, still listening, still breathing in this space, with me, take this with you. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too much. And you are not alone for choosing yourself. In a world that tries to convince you that your wholeness is a threat, your boundaries are rudeness, and your solitude is shame, choose to be the quiet rebellion. Be the woman who doesn't rush. Be the man who doesn't chase. Be the soul that doesn't collapse just to feel loved. Love will come. But the only love that matters is the one that finds you while you're standing firm in your truth. Not performing, not waiting, just being. And when that love arrives, you won't need it to complete you, because it will arrive not to fix you, but to reflect the light you've already become. And if that love never comes, you'll still be whole, because now you know something that can never be unlearned. You are not someone waiting to be loved. You are someone who is finally, fully, free.